I save my shopping bags when I don't use my regular ones, and then I cut them open and use the paper so that I can make as long of a tree as I want to. But up here, here's Manuel Jurado and his wife Maria Pena, and they had several children, but these two daughters, they were sisters, are what I'm going to talk about here. Before I get into that, let me just show up here. Let me see if I can move the screen down. No, okay. His first marriage was to Maria Teas, and you can't see it right here, it's cut off. But Maria Teas and Manuel Jurado had a daughter called, they named her Juana Jurado, and she married Pedro Brito in April 22nd of 1816 at Nuestra Senora de Guadalupe in Ciudad Juarez. And she was a widow of, oh no, Pedro was a widow of Cecilia Candelaria. So that was Manuel's first marriage and first child with Maria Teas, and then she passed, and then he married again, but that's another story. So then Manuel marries Maria Pena, and I want to start with this sister because at the bottom is going to be what's probably most relevant to you, is that this is Brian and Darren and their wives, but here is their father, David, and me. And David's father was Raul, and his mother was Esperanza. And Raul's father was Francisco, and he married Venancia Fierro. And Francisco's father was Jose Terrazas, and he married Anaclita Rico. Anaclita was the third sibling, three girls again. There's the second sibling, Patricia, and here's the first sibling, Patrocinia. They were the daughters of Hygienia Jurado, who married Francisco Rico. And so there were three Rico siblings. So I'm going to go over those one by one, but I'm going to give you an overall picture to show that when we get to this column on the left-hand side, this is Juana Jurado, the sister of Hygienia. And she married Diego Cadena, and this line goes down here. So I'll explain that in a minute. You're going to find similarities from these families that blend into these families. For example, already with Agapito Armenta, he would have been the father. Wait a minute. Juana married Diego. They had a daughter named Agustina, and she married Agapito Armenta. His brother is down over here. Is Jacinto. They were brothers. He was born in 1819, and he was born, Agapito, his brother was born in 1816. So Jacinto, I'm sorry. His daughter was Abelina Armenta, and she married Daniel Terrazas, who was the son of Juan Nepomuncio Terrazas and Patricia Rico, the sister of Anaclita, which is Brian and Darren's lineage. So you'll see both sides of these columns go back and forth, and there's, I'll give you a little spoiler alert, Martin Amador and his family is over in this neck of the woods. So, but let's go up here again, and because this sibling, this is a sister, Patrocinia Rico, and she married Pedro Lucero. They had a daughter, Epifina Lucero. Epifina married Jose Leon, and he would have been of the De Leon family, and you'll see that when we get to this column. There are a lot of, it's Ponce de Leon family, and they were one of the Ponce de Leons were the original grantees of the Ponce de Leon land grant, which is now the city of El Paso, Texas. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But let me go back over here. So here we are with Epifina Lucero marrying Jose Leon, and they had a son named Raymond Leon, and he married Estefana Fletcher. Estefana's father was James Fletcher, and her mother was Estefana Brito. Estefana Brito was the sibling of Frank Brito, who was the famous Rough Rider with Teddy Roosevelt. He's famous for a number of things. We can talk about him later. I just want to show you the outline of this. His father was Santiago Brito, and Frank's mother was Anselma Reese. Anselma died early on after he was born, and when he was about 10 years old, his father remarried to a woman by the name of Isidra Varela. And I think she is related to the Varelas of Navarez. And we'll get to that. That'll be another brown bag Navarez family that we'll do later. But a lot of these families intermarried, the cousins and whatnot. So that's the first sibling of Eugenia Jurado and Francisco Rico. The second daughter is Patricia Rico. So there were three girls, three sisters. And she married a Juan Nepomuncio Terrazas. He was the brother. He was born in 1832. He was the brother of Jose down here, the third sibling, the third Rico daughter, married Jose, born in 1838. So he was a younger brother of Juan Terrazas. So brothers married sisters. So Patricia and Juan had a son by the name of Daniel Terrazas, and he married a young lady, Avelina Armenta. Her father is Jacinto Armenta, and I didn't add her mother just because brevity here on this and for space, but he is, like I was saying, the brother of Agapito Armenta over here, and we'll come back over here in a minute. So then the third, as I said earlier, is Anaclita Rico, and she married Jose Terrazas. So Jose Terrazas and Juan Terrazas, their parents were Agapito Terrazas, and their mother was Maria Cobos. The Cobos family were from down in Chihuahua, Mexico, and it was I can't think of the name right off the top of my head, but they were an allied family for General Luis Terrazas. And General Luis Terrazas grew up in that area, and so did the Cobos. So the Terrazas are from there, originally from Spain. And what's interesting about the Terrazas family is that when they came over with Hernan Cortez from Spain, was it 1542, something like that, to Mexico? They were from about very close to Cadiz in Spain, where Darren, you were born in Rota, which is about a half an hour from Cadiz, Spain. And where this family was from was about an hour north of there. So very close, which is so interesting that, of all the places to be born, and you're born right in the area where your Terrazas line is from. Kind of reminds me when I came back here to New York, and I found like 10 minutes away from where I moved to in New York, my 5 times great grandparents are buried there, and they started the town of Ellington, New York, after it was divvied up from the indigenous people. But so I thought that was quite interesting. And then Francisco was the son of Jose Terrazas. Now, he married Venancia Fierro. And I have a theory about this. Well, I'll get to that in a minute, but remember the last name Fierro because Pancho Villa had some called him a henchman, but his last name was Fierro. And when you see that Francisco had a brother, I don't have him on this thing because I just went straight down the line, but Francisco had a sister, Mauricia Terrazas. So she was the daughter of Anaclita and Jose. Mauricia married a William Boy, I thought I had this all memorized here. I'll catch it up later. But he was very interesting. What was his name? The William Benton. And I found him and his brother. He had a brother by the name of George, not George Benton, the singer, but they were, but believe it or not, was a George. He is a possibility that he owned the stash house that Pancho Villa had. So I'm getting a lot of these recurring themes as I do my research. That now everything I have here on the documentation is documented. There are a few exceptions that I have not found the birth or marriage certificates for, but about 90% of this is documented. And my research shows that they moved together. For example, this Francisco had another brother, Demetrio, and he bought some land from Anson Mills in El Paso, Texas. Anson Mills was also in Pinos Altos. He was a surveyor, and Pinos Altos was over by Silver City. And that is where we have Santiago Brito and his son Frank Brito. Santiago helped with the moving the border between the United States and Mexico after the Rio Grande flooded, and so they had to do some resurveying. And in exchange for that, he was given a silver mine up in Pinos Altos, which was a very famous place. You'll hear about that in a little bit, but that is where one of the mines in Pinos Altos, up above Silver City, about 7,000 foot elevation, is where George Hearst had a mine. George Hearst was the father of William Randolph Hearst. William Randolph, and you've heard of him, he's the newspaper publisher, built Hearst Castle down in Southern California. His granddaughter was Patty Hearst. You probably remember how she was with the Symbionese Liberation Army in San Francisco, and they robbed a bank. And she was sentenced to 35 years, I think, but she served 7 years, and then she was pardoned by both who's the guy from Georgia, Peanuts, Jimmy Carter, and Bill Clinton. And so she got out of jail, but she would have been the great granddaughter of George Hearst, who was in Pinos Altos with Santiago Brito and Frank Brito. Santiago Brito, backing up for a second here. Santiago Brito, the Brito family comes from, an interesting story. The Britos came, the original guy was up in early Santa Fe, and he was a drummer for Oñate. When Oñate went up to Santa Fe and started a colony up there, early Santa Fe colony with they were from Spain, but they would intermarry, of course, with the indigenous peoples. But he was the original, I think his name was Rodriguez Brito. He was from Africa. He was a black man. And while he was free, he was a free black man, but he was considered, because he was darker in skin color, he wasn't considered European. And so he didn't really get to own land at the beginning, but what he did do was, he's very famous for his drumming when they would do all of their, whether it was fights or like in the, when the Pueblo Revolt came, he would do all the drumming. And I've got a picture of him. I don't have it on this, but so that's very interesting. And the Britos, so they were up in Santa Fe, and the Terrazas family did not go to Santa Fe too early. They stayed down in Mexico proper, and but they intermarried when the Indian Pueblo Revolt came in 1698, I think it was. A lot of the people left Santa Fe and they moved down to what is now Ciudad Juarez, and there were some missions down there, and so they lived there for a number of years to escape the killing and the mayhem and whatnot that was going on. And then a lot of them moved back up to Las Cruces, Socorro, the village of Doña Ana, and so that's getting ahead of myself a bit. But So anyway, so let's leave the Brito name for there right now and continue back down here because I was talking about that Jose's other son that's not here, his name was Demetrio Terrazas. I found a lot more information on him than most of his siblings, but he I'll have to get into this. So over here, we're going to be talking about the original grantee of the Ponce de Leon land grant, which is now El Paso, Texas. Anson Mills was an Anglo, and he was mayor of El Paso right in its very early, like 1870, 1880 times. And there was a lot that went on with this, the Ponce de Leon land grant, because it was granted to Juan Maria Ponce de Leon. And he had it, and he was farming it. And you can see when he was born, 1790, so he must have been about 1810 or so when he had it. The river flooded; it kept flooding, so the river kept changing course. So he eventually just kind of left and went down south again. And so when El Paso came up and coming, um, when it continued its growth, um, this went into court, the land grant, and because they had to figure out now who owned it, and it was given back to the Ponce de Leon family, but then they sold it to they sold it to they sold it to, I can't remember the name, but Anson Mills did surveying, and so he was given like 20 lots in exchange for payment for doing the surveying of the town, and it would include Canutillo and Anthony, which is where Raul and his early family were too. But so that is how um, Demetrio Terrazas, who was living in El Paso when he bought a lot of land in Canutillo from Anson Mills, who had gotten it when this land grant was clarified in the courts, and he did the surveying of it. So we'll get back to Anson Mills later on too, because he's in he pops up in Pinos Altos, where Santiago Brito and his son were. So that's interesting. And Anson Mills also, in fact, remember that Santiago Brito got his mine in Pinos Altos in exchange for his help in surveying the border there, right there at Ciudad Juarez. And that's where Anson Mills also. So they all knew each other. I mean, these people were movers and shakers, and they all did little deals. And I'm not going to bring a bunch of names into this one, but there are some big names here, and that these people all knew. Okay, so I think I'm kind of done with this right here, right now. Now I want to go up over here to this side over here. Juana married Diego Cadena. And let's see if I can make that a little bit bigger. So they had a daughter, Agustina, and she married Agapito Armenta, who is the brother of, down here like I showed. And they had a daughter, Crescencia Armenta. Crescencia married Jose Montoya. And the Armentas and the Montoyas were always up from Santa Fe, Albuquerque area. Most of them did not leave and go down to the Ciudad Juarez area when the Pueblo Revolt started. They stayed. And so when you look at the lineage there, you don't find them in Nuestra Senora de Guadalupe, the church at Ciudad Juarez. So they stayed up in the northern area of New Mexico. So Crescencia and Jose had a daughter named Maria Montoya. And this is how all of this unfolded for me. I found on Darren's 23andMe. He had a third cousin, and her name was Jan Lapke. And her grandfather was Santiago Romero. So her great-grandfather was Sinovio Romero. And she and I talked on the phone, and that's what got me started, because I thought it would help me understand a little bit more of Brian and Darren's line. And I thought it would be over, in like this side right here, but it turns out that it was a sibling of uh, of the Rico sisters. It was a Jurado sibling. And so Santiago Romero was born in 1897, and on his birth certificate, his godparents are listed as Jose Rico, and you can see over here all the three Rico siblings, the three Rico girls. Two of them married the Terrazas. So Jose Rico, now he's the one I have not found. I know his father is Massimo Rico, but I found all that, but I have not found who Massimo Rico's father is. I've not found the document yet, but 1835, and these Rico siblings, look at Patrocinia is 1840, and her sister Patricia is 1841. So you can see probably related, maybe even a brother. So I found that connection. And so here's, so Jose Rico and Emilia Serna, and he married her, and his father was Massimo Rico, and his mother was Pioquinta Lucero. This is interesting because this is how Jose Rico is going to be related to Frank Brito over here. And I have pictures of them because Frank later on was a sheriff in Las Cruces, and Jose Rico was a sheriff with him. They were two like deputies under Felipe Lucero. There were two Lucero brothers who took turns being sheriff from like 1900 to like 1936. So for 36 years, and they were elected, so the people really liked them. And that would be, so that's this Lucero family over here that I'm getting into. So Pioquinta Lucero, let me show you. Let me quickly look. Her father was Francisco Lucero, and he married another Varela, Dolores. I have not found who her parents are yet, but I'm keeping that name because it's cropping up. So that's how I start making connections. So her siblings, so Francisco, so her father was, Pioquinta's father was Francisco, and her mother was Dolores. And they had another child named Juan Lucero. So he was born in 1841. Pioquinta was born in 1847. And he married, I don't have his wife here, but his daughter was that's why I say child. Juan's child was Francisca Lucero. And she married Celso Amador, who is the nephew of Martin Amador, because his father is Jose Amador, who was the brother of Martin Amador. And another sibling of Pioquinta and Juan Lucero is, let's drop down here, Jose Lucero. He was born in 1845, and you can see Juan is 1841 and Pioquinta is 1847. So those are three siblings. He married Maria Lucero, and they had a daughter, Maria Lucero, who married Jose Ponce de Leon, whose father was Mariano Varela Garcia, and mother was Josefa Ponce de Leon. So there's the Ponce de Leon last name that is Jose's last name. He would have been Jose Ponce de Leon Garcia Varela. You know how they mix both the mother's maiden name and the father's surname together. But this father of Jose Ponce de Leon, he was the half-brother to Martin Amador's maternal grandfather. I don't have any of those names written down here, but there's another connection. Martin and Jose Amador appear. Their father was Francisco Amador, and his father before them, he married a Rodella, a woman with the last name of Rodella, and she was the half-brother. Anyway, that's a little complicated, and I'm not remembering right now, so let's just leave that alone. But he was the half-brother to Martin Amador. So then we've got, her father was Juan Maria Ponce de Leon, who was the original grantee of the Ponce de Leon land grant. He married Dolores Zazaya. She married into the Ascarates, which, whoa, they got lots of people. That's fun stuff. Lots of mines in Janos, and they dealt with all the Anglos coming into that territory. And this is cut off right here, but it just goes back to the original Ponce de Leon. So let me see, did I miss something? It's not real big, but back up here to Jose Amador, the brother of Martin Amador. He married Monica Valencia, and her father was Jose Valencia, and her mother was Felipe Talamontes. And they had another child, Toribia Valencia, a sister to Monica. And she was in Las Cruces along with Monica, and she married Silvestre Romero, who, by the way, was the father of Sinovio Romero up here, who married Maria Montoya and who had Santiago Romero, the grandfather of Darren's third cousin on 23andMe. So we've got some really cool documentation, being the DNA and the birth records, etc. So that's what I'm putting together. It's kind of interesting. It's fun for me. It's like a puzzle. But hopefully you find it interesting, and maybe if you like this, I can do another one with another name and other stories, and go from there. Okay,